When we run 1,200 chicks, therefore, we section them off into 4 groups, each with its own hover, feeders, waterers, and grit material. If something frightens the birds, the pile-up pressure will not be as great as when the numbers are small. If 1,000 chicks flee to one end of the brooder, be assured a bunch of birds on the bottom will suffocate in a minute. The competitive pressure on the birds is simply not as high when the group is smaller. Commercial producers use pre-made folding pieces of heavy cardboard and then remove them in the second and third weeks as the birds get acclimated. We have found that the partitions are just as critical at 3 weeks as they are in the first week. One way to use the partitions is to confine the birds more tightly in the first week and then gradually move the partition back to give them more room as they grow. But the main partitions between groups of 300 should not be removed. I built partitions out of plywood, hinging the pieces so that they stand up like an accordion. The partitions need not be high. 18 inches is plenty. By the time the birds can jump up on top if they are ready to go out to pasture anyway. You want the partitions light and short to allow portability and access. The main thing is to keep these birds in small groups from day one all the way through to processing. A lady told me once she used oval cattle watering troughs as brooders. Ideally, square corners should be transected with short boards to reduce corners where chicks can pile up and suffocate. The structure may be as simple or as elaborate as imaginable, but it must be capable of warmth, dryness, ventilation, and be close to drafts and predators. Chapter 8. Starting the chicks. When the chicks arrive in their shipping boxes, they can be cold, thirsty, and hungry. If they are warm, they will want to eat and drink immediately and probably explore the brooder facility. If they are cold, they will want to get warm before doing anything. Baby chicks can generally go 72 hours without food or water. If they are cold, be patient and let them get warm. Within 24 hours after arriving, 100 chicks should drink about a quart of water. If they drink, they will eat. To encourage eating, spread out some newspaper and sprinkle feed on top so that they can have quick, easy access early on. After a day or two of that, take away the newspapers and just allow access to the feed troughs. It is important to have different sized feed troughs. Chicks need small ones and larger birds should have a bigger one. Actually, the height of the trough lip is the critical factor. You don't want to make the chicks stretch to get their feed. In fact, most trough type feeders should be nested into the bedding a half inch or so to make sure that the lip does not exceed beak height. You want the birds to be able to reach down and into the feeder without stretching too much. That constant stretching can cause leg problems. Better to let them waste a little bit of feed than to encourage crippling. As the chicks scratch away the bedding from the feeder, it will rise in relation to the floor and therefore the chicks. Just move the feeder over a couple of inches so it is back on the settled bedding. You want the lip of the feed trough to hit the birds at about breast height. If it is too low, they will scoop out feed and waste it. If it is too high, they have to stretch too much for it and it will cripple. I prefer trough feeders to round feeders. The trough provides more linear space in relation to the amount of feed it holds. Round troughs are prone to bridging. They work fine for pelleted feed, which has a lot of airspace between particles, but mash bridges inside and won't fall into the pan. Waterers should be elevated as the chicks grow, not only for cleanliness but also for drinking efficiency. The waterer lip should come to about the bottom of the chick's beaks. The waterer lip should be higher than the feed trough lip. I believe it is extremely important to get silica and grit into the gizzard as soon as possible. I do not recommend commercially manufactured grit, but rather creek sand and aggregate, finding it much more diverse in mineral content. It contains particles of greater dissimilarity in size and also contains bits of vegetable matter like roots, bugs, and other things only the chicks can see. Generally, I sprinkle some of this grit on the newspaper and then sprinkle the feed on top to ensure that all the chicks right away receive a healthy dose of grinding stones for their gizzards. If the gizzard has plenty of grinding material, it will work more efficiently. If possible, hay chaff in a separate pan can be fed to the chicks because the seeds of perennials and weeds are more nutritious than are the seeds of annuals. We carry a wash tub on the hay wagon when baling hay and let the chaff from the baler's chute fall into it. In the course of a season, we can accumulate barrels of chaff. Chicks eat many pounds of it and learn quickly to scratch and search for tidbits of food. What they don't eat simply augments the bedding. These scratching and forage eating skills not only stimulate pasturing ability but also afford exercise opportunities for strong structural development. With every passing day, these chicks become more lethargic. Their meat growth outpaces the development of their skeleton and internal organs, which decreases their physical activity. Any vegetable matter that is in season is a good supplement. Things like lawn clippings, ragweed seeds, pigweed seeds, and dandelion blossoms all give the chicks fresh nutritional supplementation and stimulate their desire for forages. These must not be given in excess, however, because they are low in energy and can be detrimental to the bird's development if consumed to the exclusion of grain. Remember, green material is high in vitamins and minerals but low in energy. Furthermore, we are dealing with a bird that the industry has bred to require a certain level of hot feed in order to perform. In other words, if we fed these birds like the settlers fed their chickens at Williamsburg 300 years ago, many would probably die. I think it is unfortunate that we have created a chicken that is so far removed from a normal chicken's ability to forage and fend for itself in the barnyard. There ought to be some middle ground, but the fact is that we are dealing with a chicken that was bred to eat high-calorie, low-vitamin and mineral feed without fresh air and sunlight on antibiotics and hormones. We can do many things to make this bird worth eating, but there is a limit to what we can do. This has been the downfall of many organic producers who do not want to feed animal byproducts like fish meal or meat and bone meal because of the residues left from slaughtering the parent animal material. I think this is throwing out the baby with the bathwater. Remember that birds naturally eat large amounts of animal protein, carcasses, bugs, worms, and insects. If that material is unacceptable, then I suggest you not try to raise Cornish crossbirds. They will be sickly, prone to all sorts of skeletal problems like crooked feet, and many will simply die. We must feed the bird within its genetic parameters, and a diet nothing but grain will simply not do the job with these hyped up race car birds. They need a higher octane fuel. You can actually feed so many lawn clippings, for example, that the birds will consume too much of it and get sick simply because they are replacing too much of their high octane feed with low octane albite and vitamins and minerals green material. These supplements need to be fed as supplements, much as you would take supplement vitamin capsules to augment your meal. But you certainly would not eliminate your meal. Give them what they will eat in 10 or 20 minutes, then back off and give them some more tomorrow. The law of the little bit applies here. At this point, it is necessary to point out something obvious. Pastured poultry absolutely must not be debeaked. This procedure reduces cannibalism in factory confinement houses. If raised properly, chickens will not peck each other. Cannibalism is such a non-problem for us that we have actually had birds wounded from predators or injury heal up and not be picked on by the rest of the birds. Cannibalism is caused by a nutritional inadequacy primarily and boredom secondarily. Stress of some kind is the overriding cause. Debeaking renders birds nearly useless for eating anything but prepared mash. In order to clip off and ingest a 6-inch blade of grass, A chicken needs that full, graceful beak. Nothing less will do. Visual observation is extremely important for raising healthy chicks. If the birds spread to the edges of the brooder house, it is too hot. If they bunch up under the heat sources and pile up, it is too cold. They should routinely stretch themselves, extending a leg back and at the same time extending a wing up as high as it will go. They should walk erect and tall, not hunched over with a stilted gait. When you walk outside the brooder house, you should hear the happy chirping of the chicks. If they are quiet, something is wrong. They always sing if they are happy. Keep a liberal amount of fresh, dry wood shavings handy to immediately place on damp spots, especially around waterers and under brooder lamps where the chicks lounge. After several days, the entire floor should be covered with a half-inch of fresh shavings, or at least stirred with a hoe or a rake to turn up the fresh litter if it is clean underneath. Since these birds spend much time sleeping on the floor, their joints are extremely susceptible to problems caused by floor dampness. Bedding need not be changed between batches of chicks in the brooder facility. Much research suggests, and my own experiences attest to the fact that it is better to let the litter build up than to clean it all out. The facility need not be sterilized in any way. Deep litter of 4 to 8 inches, properly aerated, produces natural vitamins and antibodies through molds and fungi. The litter should not smell like ammonia. If a chicken house ever smells of ammonia, the litter is either too wet or does not have enough carbon in it. The carbon bonds molecularly to the highly soluble ammonia, locking it up in a chemical sponge suspension. That is the beauty of deep bedding. Normally about 1 or 2% of the chicks will die in the first couple of days. These are generally birds that were sick from the hatchery or were runs and just never got going. If you lose 4 or 5% in the first week, something is wrong. This level of care for baby chicks may sound too high for some people, but it is necessary in order to not only prepare the birds for efficient pasturing, but also in order to raise healthy birds without vaccinations, toxic housing, sterilizers, and antibiotics. Drug sterilizers and debeaking machines merely mask maladies caused by inappropriate production models. To raise a nutritious chicken, it is not enough to eliminate the negatives. We must institute positive procedures to stimulate the chicken's own abilities to thrive. As you become skillful at raising the chicks, you will be surprised what a cursory glance can tell you. In 10 seconds, I could tell if the birds are happy, if they have plenty of accessible feed and water, if they are under stress. It's like any acquired skill. There's no substitute for experience. Chapter 9. Ration. Perhaps nothing is more crucial to the performance of the broiler than what the bird eats. One beauty of pasturing is that the prepared ration represents only about 80% of the bird's diet, as opposed to 100% in a typical confinement house. As a result, we found that we can fluctuate or play around with the ration quite a bit before we see significant performance changes. At the outset, then, realize that our ration is good for us in our part of the country at our local prices. It may or may not be the best for someone in another area. Not being an expert in feedstuffs, I will not offer every alternative, hoping that you will try things small and be the final judge. Our ration began as a fairly conventional but unmedicated broiler mix without hormones many years ago. Over the years, we gradually eliminated artificial vitamins and acidulated minerals, substituting more natural supplements. A typical ration may contain 30 or more ingredients, and normally, the commercial broiler industry changes the ration every week of the bird's life. Basically, this change represents a gradual shift from protein to starch. The baby chicks require the highest level of protein. As the bird matures, the protein requirement diminishes and the need for starch increases as a percentage of the diet. Starch or energy is relatively inexpensive compared to protein. The incentive, therefore, is to get by on as little protein as necessary and pump the energy to these birds. The protein, however, is what builds feather and muscle meat. True health requires more than just a life-sustaining minimum. Here is our most current ration as of 1998. Corn 52%, roasted soybeans 29%, crimped oats 11%, feed grain limestone 1%, fertile neutral balancer 3%, fish meal 3.5%, kelp meal 0.5%, fast track probiotic 0.1%. I'll go through each of the ingredients and explain why it is in the ration. By far the biggest ingredient is corn. As noted earlier, this is energy, and these birds do need energy. They run, scratch, grow, and flap their wings. Pure caloric requirements are incredibly high on these high-performance broilers. In many areas of the country, milo or grain sorghum can be substituted for the corn. The conventional poultry industry routinely uses train car loads of waste oils and grease from food processing factories as a cheap energy component. Much of this grease comes from poultry processing. While I do not recommend this type of oil or grease in as much it is from poultry stock, I see nothing wrong with using waste kitchen oils or grease from vegetables or other meats as a tonic for broilers. Any high-fat supplement used only as a tonic can be beneficial for these high-octane birds. One of my favorites is clabber milk. If you can get extra milk, let it sour and then feed the birds the congealed portion. These curds provide a wonderful tonic to growing birds before their 6th week. After that time, curds add too much fat to the carcass. We crack half the corn and grind the other half in order to give some texture to the feed and make it easier to swallow. Imagine trying to swallow straight flour. Rations too finely ground cause blockages in the esophagus. Although the big pieces may be a little large for chicks, that's fine because it will automatically increase the protein percentage for the first week as they leave the bigger corn pieces. Then they will begin eating the leftover corn pieces in the 2nd and 3rd week, bringing the protein down a bit and eliminating the wastage. The second component is roasted soybeans, the protein. We have ready access to roasting, which preserves the fat and oils. These oils are extremely high in vitamins. At 20% fat, roasted beans taste delicious both to humans and chickens. The primary reason for roasting is to get some additional vitamins and oils without sacrificing protein. Certainly, you may use soybean meal or even cottonseed meal if necessary. The key here is vegetable protein rather than animal protein. One of the greatest benefits of pastured poultry is no cannibalism, whether it consists of the birds eating on each other or through a ration containing poultry parts, cooked, processed, or otherwise. All sources of animal proteins like bone meal, blood meal, and meat meal have fallen into disrepute due to their association with mad cow disease and other diet-enhanced maladies. Although the conventional mindset views protein as protein regardless of source, we in the clean food movement do consider source as not only relevant but actually important. The toxicity, both in terms of animal diseases and pharmaceutical residues present in meat byproducts from the factory farming sector, makes these components off limits to pastured poultry producers. The third component is crimped oats. Whole oats are fine, but crimping makes them a little more digestible. Although oats are not considered nutritionally prime, they offer other properties just as important, to quote from Morrison's Feed and Feeding. Because of the hulls, the use of oats in poultry rations tends to prevent feather picking and cannibalism. Also, the hulls seem to provide a factor that improves the growth and feather development of chicks and helps prevent mortality.